Hey everybody, and thanks for joining in for another video. Welcome to my What If series, where I make a change somewhere in the Westerosi timeline and explore how that one change ripples throughout the entire universe. And in this video, I wanted to explore an idea that really got me thinking. What if the entire history of Westeros that we know was completely changed by a single arrow? What if that arrow, instead of hitting a Kingsguard knight, strikes down the king he was trying to save? We're talking about the Defiance of Duskendale in 277 AC. In this version of the story, King Aerys the Second is killed. With the Mad King gone, his son, the thoughtful, kinda emo Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, gets the Iron Throne. This one change completely erases Robert's rebellion from happening at all. But would the reign of the man they called the Last Dragon actually bring peace to the Seven Kingdoms? Or would his own weird obsessions with prophecy and his whole sad boy vibe plunge the realm into a new, and maybe even worse, kind of darkness? Well, that's what we're here to find out. And if you could, leave a like on this video to support the channel, I'd appreciate it. But with all that being said, let's get into it. To really get how big of a change this is, we have to go back to Duskendale. In our timeline, this whole event is what turned Aerys from a paranoid guy into a full-blown madman. He was a prisoner for 6 months, and what Lord Dennis Darkland did to him just shattered his sanity. When Ser Barristan Selmy goes on his legendary solo rescue mission, the whole fort was a powder keg ready to blow. In our history, Barristan saves the king, but takes an arrow to the thigh for it. So in this new timeline, the escape is just as chaotic. Barristan is hustling the king toward the gates, and some archer on the wall lets loose one last desperate shot. The arrow flies true, but it doesn't hit Barristan. It strikes King Aerys right in the heart. He's dead before he even makes it out of the city. The Mad King is gone. And just like that, at 18 years old, Rhaegar Targaryen is now king. The first thing that happens is a huge contrast to what we know. In the original story, Aerys survives and goes on a horrifying revenge spree. He orders House Darkland and House Hollard to be completely wiped out, down to the last baby. It was this act of pure, crazy vengeance that scared the hell out of the entire Seven Kingdoms. But Rhaegar is not his father. As the news of the king's death hits the royal camp, everything goes quiet. Tywin Lannister, the Hand of the King, is a man who is all about ruthless pragmatism. His first instinct is to make an example of Duskendale for killing a king. He's ready to sack the city, burn it all down, just to send a message to anyone else who might get ideas. Rhaegar, now the new king, would give the command directly to Lord Tywin on sight. Rhaegar's first command as king is a total shocker. He tells Tywin to stand down. He orders Lord Darkland and his family to be brought to King's Landing for justice. But he specifically says no mass slaughter. The city of Duskendale itself is to be spared. And this isn't weakness, it's a smart political move. Rhaegar gets that ruling by fear was his dad's thing, and that only led to hate and instability. He wants to build his kingdom on loyalty, not terror. A few weeks later, everyone's in the throne room for the coronation of King Rhaegar, the first of his name. He's this impressive figure, tall, handsome, classic Valyrian looks with the silver hair and indigo eyes. But he's got this deep sadness about him, something that people say has been with him since he was born at the tragedy of Summerhall. He's crowned with a circlet of Valyrian steel, set with square-cut rubies, first worn by Aegon the Conqueror. His next move is just as important. Lord Dennis Darkland is brought before him in chains. All the great lords are expecting an execution. Tywin Lannister, standing there grim-faced, is definitely expecting it. You have to make an example. But Rhaegar, after thinking about it for a long time, gives his judgment. Lord Darkland is to be executed for treason and killing the king. But his wife and kids are spared. His son gets stripped of his title and sent to the wall, but the Darkland name won't be wiped out. This act of measured justice sends a message across the whole realm. The era of madness is over. Here's a king who balances justice with mercy. But this new way of doing things immediately causes a problem with the most powerful guy in the kingdom, his hand, Tywin Lannister. Tywin believes in absolute strength in crushing your enemies completely. He sees Rhaegar's mercy as a huge weakness. He argues with the young king behind closed doors, telling him he needs to be tougher to show that Targaryen iron fist. Rhaegar listens, but he doesn't budge. This disagreement is a turning point. Within a few months, Tywin Lannister resigns as Hand of the King, saying he needs to go back to Casterly Rock. It's a polite excuse. Really, it's a protest. He can't work for a king he disagrees with so fundamentally. Rhaegar lets him go. The old lion leaving is a big deal, but it's also a chance for Rhaegar to finally be free from his father's shadow and his hand's influence. He starts building a new court, bringing in men of honor and wisdom his father pushed away, like Jon Arryn, a guy everyone respects. The realm, tired of all the madness, finally feels like it can breathe again. They have the king they always hoped for. But even as he's building this new golden age, those whispers of prophecy are still following him, just waiting to cause trouble. In the years after Rhaegar's coronation, you could feel a real sense of hope across the Seven Kingdoms. The Red Keep, which used to be this paranoid place that smelled like wildfire, totally transforms. King Rhaegar was everything his father wasn't: calm, fair, and actually cared about his people. He was even known to sneak out of the castle in a simple cloak with his harp, just to walk among the regular folks in King's Landing, listen to their problems, and sing them these sad, beautiful songs from old Valyria. This was completely unheard of for a Targaryen, and it earned him a kind of love his father's terror never could. His reforms were quick, and they made a difference. He got rid of his dad's spy network, ending all the random arrests. He cut the crazy taxes Aerys had put on everyone, which boosted the city's economy. His reign was like a renaissance. Artists and scholars came to the capital because the king actually valued knowledge and beauty. And here's a crucial change. His marriage to Elia Martell of Dorne becomes the foundation of his new dynasty. In our timeline, their marriage was full of tragedy and insults from Aerys, but here, she's treated with the respect she deserves as queen. Rhaegar, free from his father's paranoia, is a much better husband. Their relationship is one of mutual respect. The birth of their first kid, a daughter they name Rhaenys, is celebrated everywhere. Then 2 years later, a son is born, Aegon. He's the spitting image of his father, the perfect heir. With an heir and a spare, the succession is secure. The Martells of Dorne, once snubbed by Aerys, are now the throne's biggest allies. The tragedy that happened to Elia and her kids in our timeline, their brutal murder during the sack of King's Landing, is completely avoided. They are alive, they are loved, and they are safe. Rhaegar also mends fences with the other great houses. He makes Jon Arryn his hand, and Lord Arryn's calm wisdom is the perfect balance to Rhaegar's artsy nature. Through Jon, he strengthens ties with the Vale, the North, and the Stormlands. The betrothal between Robert Baratheon and Lyanna Stark is still on. Lord Rickard Stark is happy with the new king's stability and sees no reason to distrust him. Robert Baratheon is still the loud, brawling Lord of the Stormlands, but his hatred for Targaryens doesn't really have any fuel in this timeline. Rhaegar is a king you have to respect, even if Robert hates to admit it. His main focus is on his future with Lyanna. The great alliance of Stark, Arryn, and Baratheon still exists, but it's an alliance for peace, not for war. Even Tywin Lannister, sulking out in Casterly Rock, can't really find anything to complain about with the way the kingdom is run. The realm is rich, the laws are fair, and the succession is safe. While he thinks Rhaegar is too soft, he can't argue with the results. So the Seven Kingdoms are at peace. It's a golden age of song and chivalry. But underneath all this, an old obsession is stirring in the king's mind. Rhaegar was always a guy who was into books and prophecies. And with his 2 kids born, his mind keeps going back to that ancient prophecy he read about as a boy. The prince that was promised, and the idea that the dragon must have 3 heads. This private belief that he and his family have this huge destiny is the one dark cloud in a clear blue sky. And it's this shadow that's going to lead him to the great tourney at Harrenhal, and a fateful moment that will test the peace he built. For a guy like Rhaegar Targaryen, peace was never really the final goal. It was just a step. He needed the realm to be stable so he could fulfill a destiny he believed was written in the stars. His obsession with prophecy was the main thing driving his whole life. He believed at first that he was the prince that was promised. Later, he started to think the prophecy was about his children. This whole thing is tied to the lore of Aegon the Conqueror's dream, a vision of a terrible winter and an army of the dead coming from the north. This prophecy, passed down from king to heir, was known as the Song of Ice and Fire, something we've learned a lot more about in the newer shows. Rhaegar took this legacy super seriously. He saw his daughter Rhaenys and his son Aegon as two parts of the puzzle. But the prophecy, how he saw it, wasn't complete. The dragon has 3 heads. He needed a 3rd child. And that's what brings us to the great tourney at Harrenhal in 281 AC. In our timeline, people thought Rhaegar held the tourney to secretly plot against his crazy dad. But here, Rhaegar is already the king. The tourney is a huge party to celebrate his peaceful reign. Everyone who's anyone is there. Robert Baratheon is knocking knights off their horses. Eddard Stark is watching quietly with his sister Lyanna, and Queen Elia is there with their kids. The tourney goes down pretty much like the stories say. There's the mystery of the Knight of the Laughing Tree, who turns out to be Lyanna Stark defending a bannerman's honor. Rhaegar, being the curious guy he is, probably figures this out and is super impressed. Here's a woman with beauty, but also a fierce ice spirit to go with his fire. Rhaegar himself enters the jousts, and he's an amazing warrior. He wins the whole thing. The crowd goes wild. And now comes the tradition. The champion has to name a queen of love and beauty. Everyone expects him to crown his wife, Queen Elia. It's the right thing to do. And in this moment, the first crack appears in his perfect reign. Rhaegar rides right past his wife. He rides past all the other highborn ladies. He stops his horse right in front of Lyanna Stark and places the crown of blue winter roses in her lap. The whole crowd just goes silent. It's a shocking breach of etiquette, a public diss to his own queen, and a really intimate gesture to a woman who is engaged to one of his most powerful lords. It's not an act of war like it was in the original timeline, but it's still a huge scandal. Whispers explode. Robert Baratheon's face darkens with rage. Ned Stark looks super uncomfortable. Queen Elia keeps her cool, but her brother Oberyn is fuming. In the days after, Rhaegar asks to speak with Lyanna, but not in secret. He requests a formal meeting, with Ned present. In the God's Wood at Harrenhal, King Rhaegar does something crazy. He tells them everything. Not about love, but about prophecy. He tells them about Aegon's dream, the long night, and why he desperately needs a 3rd child for the 3-headed dragon. He's not trying to start an affair. He's looking for an ally. He sees something in Lyanna, a wild spirit from the north that might understand this magic and destiny stuff. He's sharing this terrible secret, maybe hoping for some guidance. Lyanna is stunned and conflicted. Ned is just suspicious, seeing a mystical obsession that could screw up everything. The meeting ends not with a secret romance, but with this new dangerous tension. Rhaegar's obsession is out in the open now, and in his quest to save the world, he might have just planted the seeds that could tear it apart. The peace he built now feels, for the first time, really fragile. The tourney at Harrenhal becomes a legend, but not the one we know. It's remembered not as the start of a war, but as the peak of King Rhaegar's reign, and the moment a weird sadness seemed to hit the kingdom. Crowning Lyanna Stark was a huge scandal, but it didn't start a rebellion. For that, you need more than flowers. You need fire and blood. And in this timeline, that spark never gets lit. Because Rhaegar is king, there's no secret elopement. There's no abduction. Lyanna Stark doesn't get taken to a tower in Dorne. And because there's no abduction, the dominoes that led to Robert's rebellion never fall. Brandon Stark, Lyanna's hot-headed brother, doesn't ride to King's Landing screaming for Rhaegar to come out and die. So he isn't arrested by a paranoid Mad King. His father, Lord Rickard Stark, isn't summoned to the capital. This means the most horrific event that started the rebellion, the brutal execution of both Rickard and Brandon Stark, never happens. The Starks are alive and well. With no Starks murdered, King Rhaegar has no reason to demand that Jon Arryn hand over Ned and Robert. So Jon Arryn doesn't raise his banners in defiance. The great houses don't rise up in open war. Robert's rebellion, the war that defined a generation, is just gone. The Seven Kingdoms stay at peace, but it's a nervous peace now. Robert Baratheon's dislike of Rhaegar now has a personal, venomous edge to it. He marries Lyanna as planned, but their marriage is a rough one. Robert is possessive and jealous, and Lyanna feels trapped. They have kids, but they aren't happy. In King's Landing, Rhaegar's obsession with prophecy is still his main struggle. He loves his wife, Queen Aelia, and his kids. But the prophecy haunts him, and he's facing a huge dilemma. His Queen Aelia has delicate health. The birth of Aegon nearly killed her. The Masters were clear. A third pregnancy would be a death sentence. This puts Rhaegar at a terrible crossroads. To get his third head of the dragon, he'd need another woman. But taking a second wife, like his ancestors did, or having an affair would cause a massive scandal. It would wreck his marriage, piss off Dorne, and probably start the exact kind of war he's trying to avoid. So the years go by in this calm but tense state. The lords are loyal, but they're watching him. Robert holds his grudge. Tywin plots from Casterly Rock, and Doran Martell watches from Sunspear, ready to protect his sister. On the surface, the Targaryen dynasty is stronger than ever, but King Rhaegar is a man torn in two. His duty is to the peaceful realm he built, but his destiny, as he sees it, is to save the world from a darkness nobody else can even see. The choice he makes will decide the fate of his entire kingdom. The biggest war of Rhaegar's reign was never fought on a battlefield. It was fought inside his own head. For years, the question of the third head of the dragon tormented him. He'd spend hours in the library, looking for any answer that wouldn't force him to choose between the prophecy and his family. He even talked about it with his hand, Jon Arryn. Jon, being the practical one, told him to just let it go. "Your Grace," he'd say, "you saved this realm from your father. You gave it peace. That's a legacy bigger than any prophecy. Don't risk it for a shadow." The turning point doesn't come from a scroll, it comes from a talk with his wife. Queen Aelia was frail, but she was sharp. She knew what was eating at him. One evening, she confronts him. She knows about the prophecy, his need for a third child, and what the Masters told her about her health. And in this moment of incredible love and sacrifice, Aelia gives him an out. She brings up the old Targaryen custom of polygamy, suggesting that if he really needs another child to save the world, maybe the realm could accept it if the right woman was chosen. It's a testament to her love that she'd even consider this. But as Rhaegar looks at his wife, at the pain in her eyes, and then at his two kids, he finally gets it. To chase this prophecy means breaking the heart of the woman who stood by him and ruining the stable life he built for his children. He realizes that a king's first duty isn't to some old legend, it's to his people. And in that moment, he makes his choice. He chooses his family. He chooses his kingdom. He chooses duty over prophecy. He tells Aelia she's his only queen, and their two children are enough. The dragon will have two heads, and that's that. A huge weight lifts off him. The sadness that was always there finally starts to fade. With this settled, Rhaegar's reign enters its true golden age. He dedicates himself completely to being a good king. He works with Jon Arryn to build roads and ports, create a fairer justice system, and even founds a royal university in King's Landing. Westeros thrives like never before. The great houses finally relax. Even Tywin Lannister comes around, eventually agreeing to marry his daughter Cersei to Rhaegar's younger brother Viserys, finally getting that royal alliance he wanted. Rhaegar's kids, Rhaenys and Aegon, grow up in a court of honor and learning, poised to be great rulers themselves. The Targaryen dynasty is secure and beloved, and so King Rhaegar is remembered as Rhaegar the Wise, the king who healed a broken kingdom and started a century of peace. But here's the final, terrible irony of this whole story. In saving his kingdom, Rhaegar might have just doomed the world. Because he chooses duty over prophecy, a third child is never born. Because there's no abduction of Lyanna Stark, there is no secret child of ice and fire. Jon Snow is never born. And way up north beyond the wall, the real threat is still there. The others, the White Walkers, they aren't just a story. They're real, and they're waking up. Without the prophecy being fulfilled, without the prince that was promised, Who is going to be there to lead the living when the long night actually comes? Rhaegar built a beautiful, peaceful world, but he unknowingly left the door unlocked for the ancient darkness of winter to sweep it all away. So, what do you think? Did Rhaegar make the right choice? Was a generation of peace worth being unprepared for the end of the world? Or would the prophecy have found another way? Let me know your theories down in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you enjoyed this journey into an alternate Westeros, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more what-ifs from the world of Ice and Fire. Clicking that bell icon will ensure you're the first to know when we explore another path in history. In the end, the story of King Rhaegar the Wise is a tragedy, just a different kind. Not a tragedy of war and betrayal, but a quieter one of choice and consequence. By stopping Robert's rebellion, he saved his family and gave the Seven Kingdoms a golden age. But in choosing the good of the moment, he might have sacrificed the ultimate survival of everyone. He won the battle for peace in his time, but in doing so, he may have lost the war for the dawn. The world he built was a paradise, but one built on the edge of an abyss, with no hero destined to hold the line.